Hello, and welcome to another Championship Managerial Special from the Online Sport Podcast. I'm Craig Savage, and with me, as always, is Mr. Daniel Cody. Today, we are talking about Bristol City. They had sacked Nigel Pearson recently and hired Liam Manning as their new head coach. Let's talk about the previous manager, Nigel Pearson, aka the best Championship manager. From 2021 to 2023, he had 131 games, 42 wins, 32 draws, and 57 defeats with a win percentage of 32%. Bristol City doing okay at the moment in the championship. So this was quite a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few things that surprised me about it. Firstly, when he was sat, there were 5 points off the playoffs, I think. Secondly, was the fact that obviously he'd been there a significant amount of time by championship standards, and the chairman's statements afterwards, which were sort of about the fact that we've amassed the best squad. We had this conversation a couple of weeks ago about them being the best squad that they've had since he'd been there, and maybe had a top six squad. But I don't think either of us necessarily on paper agree with that. We would think they're definitely an improved squad, but probably not a top six one yet, looking at the standard of the championship. So my initial thought was, is Nigel Pearson being judged a little bit unfairly? But I guess we have to look at the flip side of that and say, in the 3 years or whatever we've been doing championship predictions, they are officially the most inconsistent team in the championship, which basically tells you where the problems were, doesn't it? And they have got a more solid, a more dependable team now, and maybe that was part of the problem. But even since he's gone, they've had the same under interim management, and that's going to be the new man's biggest job when we get to him in a minute. But overall, I would say when he first came in the season behind closed doors, he did a pretty decent job to steady the ship and get them into a decent position, started well. And they've been solid 2 years. They've had a squad that's been mid-table-ish level, and they've finished mid-table-ish. They've had spells where they've been brilliant. They've had spells where they've been awful. They've quite often had leaky defensive periods, and they've kept snatching players from Luton Town. So, there's only so much sympathy you're going to have for Nigel Pearson. But overall, we know he's a good manager. He did a decent job. It's not a record that's going to stop him getting another one. It's not an abject failure. And he left them 5 points off the playoffs, which I'm sure will be his first line in whatever interview he goes to next. But I can kind of see why Bristol City wanted to go in a slightly different direction. What I'm a bit surprised about is that they didn't wait until the November international break, because given who the new man is, that probably would have been better for all parties.
Yeah, it's not the first club that Nigel Pearson's been done dirty. But yeah, it's a weird one for Nigel Pearson because I always felt kind of disappointed in Bristol City. All the hype, nice stadium, shocking camera, gantry, but should be always there and thereabouts. And it always seemed like, oh, they're good on a good run, a couple of wins here, and then they lose a couple of games, a couple of draws, and then they're back to square one. And I always find it baffling with Bristol City. Maybe it might change, but I doubt it. But let's talk about the new man in charge. He is Liam Manning. Was at Oxford United, doing very well in League One. He's only been there since March of this year, so quite a surprising turn to go to him. A club statement from Bristol City is as follows. Liam Manning obviously joins on a 3.5-year contract until June 2027. Manning joins from Oxford United alongside Chris Hogg, who will be his assistant head coach. The chairman, John Lansdowne, said, Liam's a great fit for the club, a style of player we want. He has a very detailed approach to coaching, improving players and getting the best out of them, as his record at MK and Oxford United shows, while he has valuable experience within the Manchester City group and in Belgium. As soon as we made the change, Liam was our first choice, and we are grateful to Oxford United for their extremely professional way they have approached the departure of someone who was doing a fantastic job for them. Liam Manning has said, this is a terrific opportunity and one that I'm really looking forward to. If you look at the vision of the club and where they want to get to and how they want to get there, I think that is a really good fit and alignment with my journey and where I want to get to. We are custodians, and you have to respect and understand the past and the culture of the area that you moved and leave the club in a better state. We'll be doing our utmost in terms of day-to-day in putting strong processes in place, getting emotionally invested in what we do, and having that passion, that drive, that hunger to improve everything. I have a sense of deja vu here.
Go
I Once again, this podcast show has a little reference to Cheeky Luton, even though we've already done that already. This feels like Nathan Jones to Stoke 2019.
Well, in one sense, yes. I don't agree on the footballing side. I'll be honest with that, and I'll get to why in a bit. But one of the things that came out of this, and we'll get rid of this quickly, is the bit from Oxford side saying, particularly with fans saying, "Why would you go there? Because you're going to take us to the Championship next year too." But a bit similar to what Nathan Jones had at Luton. When you've been a player and a coach and you've not played at the top level and you've not earned that ridiculous money that pays off houses in a couple of months or whatever, the opportunity financially to go from basically earning the equivalent of a small house from a year to earning 10, 15 grand a week is an opportunity that most can't turn down. So I'll never begrudge them doing it. The way they do it isn't ideal. It did make me laugh in a statement where he talks about the passion and the drive and all of that sort of stuff, being emotionally invested, because he didn't sound that emotionally invested in his pre-match press conference with Oxford United on Monday morning. I'll be completely honest about that, but maybe we know the reasons for that now. And as you say, leaving after 8 months, we talk a lot about clubs not being loyal to managers, but then this is an example the other way around, isn't it? But one of the things that came out of the statement a lot, Craig, was style of play. It seems to be the thing, and it's the same as we touched on with Millwall yesterday. Certainly the same as the QPR one last week. Everyone's chasing this progressive, whatever other words you want to use, style of play for the 21st century, that we're going to copy Pep because he was in the Manchester City group. And to be fair, he's a very good manager. We'll get to his record in a bit, but it seems to be that style of play is the biggest thing. Nigel Pearson was an efficient, was an effective manager, but Liam Manning is probably seen as the attractive manager. And given some of the jobs he's done before, there's no denying that his football can be that. But again, we asked the same question as yesterday, Craig. At the moment, does the squad he have suit it? That maybe is up for debate.
No, it's. Do you feel it's more of a risk to bring Liam Manning in? Because obviously his very short coaching record. I know obviously Joe Awood's had is his first head coach job, but Liam Manning has done okay at Milton Keynes. Should have probably taken them up automatically and flopped. And then the season after that, they didn't start well. And then he's only had a very short time at Oxford United. So do you feel this is a big risk by Bristol City?
Potentially, I get where you're getting at, and I know that you'll never give MK credit, but you've got to say the 3 jobs he has done, he's been brilliant. I mean, his win rate is basically 47% at all 3 clubs. It's a pretty spectacular record. He's got experience abroad. He's got experience in the lower leagues. I mean, essentially, he's done the traditional route that we always say coaches should do before they step up. And to come into the Championship now, I agree with you. He should have come up that season with MK, but they played some unbelievable football. His Oxford side now, you've got to remember, he took over a side that was scrapping for relegation at the end of last season, and now they're flying at the top of the division. So you can only argue that based on what he's done a very good job. And given what we saw yesterday and some of the other managers where they've got no experience in England or no experience at all as a club head coach, you have to argue he's actually probably fairly well qualified for the job in comparison. Maybe compared to last week where everyone thought it was going to be John Eustace, that's not the case. But again, if it's based on style of football, Liam Manning has probably got the best record and perhaps the most experience of someone who's going to give you that style that you're desperately chasing. So I can completely understand it. I don't actually think it's a huge risk. The only question for me is, have Bristol City got realistic expectations? Because the chairman saying after Nigel Pearson went that this on paper is a top 6 squad and we should get there. That for me is a worry, because there are probably about 14 clubs after the top 3 in the Championship that might have that thought at the moment, and only 3 of those other 14 can make it.
Do you think he's added more pressure, considering straight away it's a top 6 squad?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he hasn't mentioned it in the Manning statement, but what he said after Pearson went is going to put pressure on the next man. There's no doubt about that. Obviously, we know a few of the players well. They've played for Luton before, and they seem to have a pattern in their recent history of taking people off of Oxford as well. There's a couple of those in the squad. But I do think it adds pressure, but it's not so much about pressure, because that's absolutely fine. I think it's realism. You look at Obviously, we've mentioned the fact they've been the most inconsistent the last 3 years. They've not had the best defensive record at times. But more importantly, you look at the championship, and it was the same battle we faced with Luton last year. Virtually every club in that division has played in the Premier League, and Bristol City haven't. Like, to get there for the first time, it's a massive, massive ask against teams that have had that experience, fans that have experienced it, that understand it. It's a huge ask. And yes, Bristol City are a club that are generally very well run off the pitch. They're generally sustainable. They manage things very well, but you're putting a lot of pressure on someone to say, we think we've got a top 6 squad, but you're also going to play great style of football. Something's got to give somewhere, because you can't always do both. And I just hope that it's not too much pressure or too much expectation, but I would trust that he's not taking a job if he knew that was going to be the case. But he's got good people around him. Chris Hogg had been at Newcastle in particular, and with him at MK and Oxford. So he's got experience around him. He's got quality in the staffing, a bit of quality in the team as well. I'm just not sure they're a top 6 team, Craig, at this stage.
No, I don't think they're a top 6 side yet. I think there's far too many stronger squads at the moment, but we know the championship can swing in roundabouts, and a lot of teams last season would probably say Luton weren't a top 6 side, even though they finished third. So it can happen to anyone. So let's look at the fixtures for Bristol City coming up. Let's start with November. QPR first away on November the 11th, and then after the international break is Middlesbrough at home, and then Southampton away, and then into early December it's Norwich at home and Huddersfield away. A bit of obviously, I say a mixed bag. I'll say that for a lot of heavy fixtures for these new managerial roles, but this is an opportunity for Bristol City, not probably this month, because Middlesbrough and Southampton are better sides at the moment. But it's a perfect opportunity for Liam Manning to get 3 points against a new manager in QPR as well.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's battle of the new managers, isn't it? Could be a big lift going into the international break, but I'm more interested, to be honest, to see how they get on in those Borough and Southampton games, because if they do want to compete to be a top 6 side, then they're the sides that they're going to have to pick up results against ultimately, and wins there are the ones that are going to close the gap. And for all I've said about them potentially not having a top 6 squad on paper, as we said yesterday, the championship is so open again this year. Bar the top 3, who I think will be there, there's not really anyone who stands out. And there is an opportunity for someone to do what all of Luton, Coventry and Sunderland did last year and get into the playoffs probably against expectation. So they're only 4 points off it at the minute. They've got to score more goals. And that's going to be a quite interesting one with the initial fixtures that you mentioned, because you look at QPR, they've been horrendous defensively most of this year. Borough barely kept a clean sheet till October. And Southampton have got one of the worst defensive records in the league. Norwich have got the worst. So it's an opportunity for him to address that. Bristol City have scored 16 goals this year, which I think is the 5th or 6th lowest in the division. Defensively, they're excellent. They're joint third best. They're going to be very good. But that improvement has come at a cost going forward. So Liam Manning, with his aggressive style of football, his teams have always scored goals. You've got to give him that. I'm wondering how that's going to develop, because I do feel that it's going to be the important factor for them. Can they score goals whilst keeping their defence fairly solid? Which for this year, for the first time, it probably has been. I'm not so sure, but he's got good players going forward, a bit of experience up there. He's got a few players that we know well, the likes of Harry Cornick and that, who have got playoff experience from Luton a couple of years ago. So you never know. But I think for now, it's stay in the mix till January. It's a mixed run of fixtures. Pick up a few results here and there. Stay where you are now, 4 or 5 points off the playoffs in mid-table. And then probably add 1 or 2 attacking stars in January that maybe suit his style to unlock doors whilst playing very intricate football through the thirds normally, as we saw at MK and Oxford.
Right, so let's look for a prediction now. Bristol City in the last decade do tend to give managers time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see Liam Manning doing this season? And if they do fail to make the playoffs, but the results are improving, they're close to the playoffs, do you think Liam Manning, obviously, do you think there's more pressure on Liam Manning to deliver next season?
I think ultimately he'll be all right as long as they improve the style of football and don't get any worse positionally. And I kind of think that's where they'll be, probably somewhere in the bottom half of the top half or very close to the top of the bottom half. But they've got to improve going forward. And if they can make the football more exciting, score more than a goal a game on average, then they're probably going to be all right. I think Liam Manning will be given time, and Bristol City have generally proven that under the Lansdowns in recent years. But the big question is, there's pressure, there's expectation, and the statements haven't helped. But I think he's going to get time. He's got to get a bit of backing in January if they want to push for the top six. And there is an opportunity this year because there are a lot of inconsistent teams in there. If I had to stay on there, I'd say he'll get time. They'll finish in the bottom half of the top half this year. And then probably the same next year because Bristol City have done that quite often. They had a couple of years under Lee Johnson where they looked like they were going to be close, just missed out, and then just couldn't push on to the next level. So it's kind of where I see them at the moment, but it only takes one spectacular window in the Championship to change that, doesn't it? So for me, they're a top half side, but I don't think they make the top six. And I still think Liam Manning will be given next season based on that. History would tell you that.
Final question from me is, does your teams that have been promoted to the Premier League for the first time, teams like Luton, Brentford, Huddersfield, add the pressure to Bristol City themselves because they see themselves as a big club, obviously down where they are in the country. They've been in the Championship for a very, very long time. And when they see teams like those three come back down, well, go to League One, and then obviously into the Championship, spend a couple of years in the Championship, and then move on, does it add that little bit of pressure onto themselves rather than people from the outside saying, yeah, Bristol City should be up there?
Yeah, and I think particularly the budgets that Huddersfield and Luton did it with, and even Barnsley when they made the playoffs a couple of years ago as well, it does give you that little bit of extra pressure. And we actually saw a lot of managers getting sacked as a result of that around those times. So yes, it probably does add a bit of extra pressure. Obviously, it's one of the few cities in England that hasn't had a Premier League club. So from a City point of view, and it's a good place, it would be good for them to have Premier League football. But it's going to take time. They have been a club that have generally had stability off the pitch, and perhaps they've been punished for it because some clubs have overspent and got their way up there. But I ultimately think, yes, it adds pressure. I do think they'll get there eventually, but it's just going to take a bit of time. And if they can do it under Liam Manning, they'll do it playing good football, which will be a double win. But I just don't think it's going to happen that quickly. This season, we said was going to be tough for everyone because of the sides that had come down and because of some of the sides that missed out last year and were poor after coming down the previous year. So I'm not sure it happens quickly, but given time, Liam Manning will build a side that plays good football. And Bristol City are one of those number of clubs that can ruin the party and get in the playoffs.
There you go. That's Daniel Cody's thoughts. My thoughts are not this season. If they obviously recruit well, probably go for younger players in the summer. Could work out. I still think it'd be playoffs. It depends who gets relegated from the Premier League this season. But that is our thoughts on the sacking of Nigel Pearson and the hiring of Liam Manning as Bristol City head coach. Let us know down in the comments what you think of the whole changes at Bristol City. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast. You can follow us on all the social media platforms, Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, the main three really. And I'll see you next time.